Pan Am 747 jumbo jet with 255 people on board has crashed just north of the Scottish border. There's an emergency telephone number in America. It's 0101 212 880 1234. Pan Am flight PA103 took off from London Heathrow, bound for John F. Kennedy Airport in New York at 6:25 this evening. Radar contact was lost at 7:19. The plane came down in the town of Lockerbie in Dumfriesshire. It crashed into a petrol station and a number of houses. Eyewitnesses report a huge explosion and a 300-foot fireball. There were 240 passengers and 15 crew on board. We've just had this from America.
Some of them may have been Americans. We're sending a number of inspectors from our PA103 certificate office here in New York, and the National Transportation Safety Board is putting together a team as well to go over there. So that would be an indication that Americans would be on board. We have no confirmation, no numbers as to injuries or fatalities at this time.
The latest and the full details on News at 10.
Terrorist attack in Europe on December 21st, 1988. Pan Am Flight 103 was blown up over Lockerbie, killing 270 people. Well, I was a reporter for TVM at the time and covered this story, and I went back 35 years later to talk to those most affected. Well, Dr. Jim Swire, whose daughter Flora was on the plane, has been a tireless campaigner to try to find out, get to the bottom of who was responsible. Well, Jim and his wife Jane's story is being told in a new TV series starring Colin Firth and Catherine McCormick, and I caught up with them. First of all, thank you, both of you, for doing this in the first place, because, you know, it's something that's very important and personal to me, and the more people that know about it, the better. So it was great that you did it in the first place. But it's very difficult to play, I would have thought, to play real people anyway. But did you have a few sleepless nights about this one? Was it a difficult one to do?
Very much so.
Yeah.
I mean, one's own memories, which vary according to age and to where you were, and how connected you are to it, are a starting point anyway. And then the script had a huge impact on me.
Well, the scripts were brilliant and really wanted to be a part of it. But when you're playing someone, what the Swires have been through, and portraying a real person who is still alive today and very much going through, you know, whatever that process of grief was and is for the family, that I found quite daunting, and, you know, there's a huge responsibility there. So, you know, you can only hope that once you've said yes to it, that you know, did some kind of justice.
Of course, no, absolutely. He's an amazing man, Jim Swire, isn't he? He's extraordinary. He's a terrier. He just never, ever gave up.
Admiration I had for his tenacity and sympathy as well, because he wouldn't have chosen this. You know, and I mean, he wouldn't have chosen to go on campaigns. He wouldn't have chosen to take the risk of going to meet Gaddafi. He wouldn't have chosen to have to keep questioning what he was told. And I feel this is something that goes very, very deep. It's trying to fathom the unfathomable. I found that quite emotionally challenging to engage with, really. But I think one of the things that propelled him as well, it wasn't just tenacity. It wasn't as if I've got an answer, that's not enough, I want more. The answers didn't feel right to him.
He's incredible. He's an extraordinary man, and the book is remarkable. And there by his side, all the way, there's Jane.
I mean, she's incredibly strong. There were a few moments in some documentaries that I saw. I filmed them and sort of used them on set before various scenes, because she had so much dignity and grace and strength. And there are other moments where you see such vulnerability as well. And as you say, the family being, you know, standing by Jim's side throughout, and I think, yeah, maybe he wouldn't have been able to do it without her.
And the fact that they're still together.
And I think that's an extraordinary testament to her, because you can see their paths diverging. You know, we have to speak for our interpretation in terms of our film. I'm not sure quite how much authority I have to speak for the real Jim and Jane. You know, she clearly feels that the way Jim is dealing with it isn't her way.
It was the most heinous act of terrorism and violence, the worst that we've ever seen, never mind in the UK, but in Europe. But from that evil, there was quite remarkable things happened. There was a lot of good that we saw, particularly from people in Lockerbie, and the friendships that were formed, and the friendships that the Swires formed as well.
Yes, and very powerfully. You feel that love was born out of it. I don't want to sort of try to be glib about the positives, but I've been very, very moved about some of those connections between the people in Lockerbie and the people in America. There are literally thousands of people with very, very powerful stories to tell.
It's going to mean ever such a lot, and it will make sure that we don't forget. You know, it's so important, and I don't want people to grow up not remembering this. So you've done a great thing. You really have. Thank you.
Well, it happened in 1988, but so much of this story has been going on since then. Not just investigations, but the story of two people who've carried this.
How did a bomb get onto Flight 103? We have a right to know.
Jim's a very interesting protagonist. He's quite heroic in the story, but he starts off as a middle-aged general practitioner in the Midlands who is forced to take his life in the direction he does.
I'm afraid there are no survivors.
Are you completely sure? This is a man who had a basic trust in institutions. He wasn't a natural activist.
This is an incredibly difficult time.
I just want answers, Minister.
As a younger man, he was in the army, so he's very much a sort of establishment figure, really.
So I'm not here to talk politics, I'm here to talk truth and justice.
But Swire, of course, begins to become anti-establishment and loses faith in law enforcement and in the legal process.
He actually wanted to expose the corruption and censorship of the system. I think it's one of those classic stories of the mouse that roared and stood up to the government and to the establishment.
Your government is not taking responsibility. You are evading the truth.
To realise how far this man had travelled into the unknown. 2 Libyans were accused, Gaddafi was refusing to hand them over, and nothing seemed to be working. Jim was not under any illusions about how dangerous Gaddafi was.
Jim met with Gaddafi on a number of occasions, went out to Libya at that time. The courage of the man is unbelievable.
PA103, the truth must be known. One of the things that's so extraordinary about the character of Jim Swire, he's very alive to facts, to evidence, to doubt. It takes, I think, quite a lot of courage to keep doubt alive. And I think what he was carrying through all of this, not only are these twists and turns, but there were people close to him that were paying a price for it.
However compelling Jim's story is to try to get the answers for his daughter's death, he didn't do that in a vacuum. He had a wife, and Jane was very much affected by Jim's actions. I want you to promise me something, that you accept the verdict, whatever it is, and we get you back.
I promise.
So that sort of becomes her campaign in a way, to tell Jim the hard truths, that if he doesn't come back to them emotionally, there'll be no family maybe left. I want to be closer to my children, to my grandchildren.
I'm not leaving this house.
I want to be around life, not death, every single minute of the day. There's a scene where Jane talks about these nightmares she's been having. That was part of where her grief went, into desperately needing to know what happened in those final few moments before Flora did die. An expert told me that Flora might have been conscious for as much as 15 seconds. 15 seconds knowing she was falling to certain death. As an actor, you sort of bring in your own experiences of loss, but that scene was just incredibly emotional to do, because this is what Jane really lived day in, day out.
Not everybody processes their grief in the same way, even if the grief is for the same person, within the same family.
She understands him, the form that his grief took, this need to get to the truth. She understands that Jim will never give up the fight, and she loves him for all of that. All these years.
It's always for her.
From the Sky documentary, they're talking about how Jim dealt with Flora's death, and then they asked her, and she said, I've just dealt with it one day at a time. And in that one moment, there's such a story there, and there's such dignity and grace and humanity and vulnerability and huge strength, and she's just an extraordinary woman.
They've struck me as such impressive, admirable, likeable people. It really does run quite deep when you're representing them. The writers have done an extraordinary job of trying to represent several decades in a few hours, and the complexities and the nuances of these two people in the relationship they have.
Rules
C begins in about 15 minutes, but now we go over to the newsroom and Michael Burke.
Rescue teams from all over Britain are heading for the scene of what looks to be Britain's worst air crash tonight. Just after 7 this evening, a jumbo jet crashed onto the town of Lockerbie in the Scottish borders. It was a Pan-American Boeing 747, flight number 103 from London Heathrow to Kennedy Airport, New York. We now know there were 244 people on board, including 3 children. It came down on a petrol station and a housing estate on the south side of Lockerbie. There are casualties amongst the townspeople. We don't know how many. Bodies have been found up to 2 miles away. There's no immediate indication of why the plane crashed. Officials say there was no other airplane involved and rule out a mid-air collision. No explanation yet why the plane crashed from 31,000 feet without even time for a Mayday message.
This is the little border town of Lockerbie tonight. The air is thick with smoke, flames and the smell of aviation fuel. A crater 20 feet deep marks the spot near the main Glasgow road where the jumbo jet came down. Pan Am Flight 103 from Heathrow to New York carried 15 crew and 229 passengers. Holidaymakers bound for the States, Americans going home for Christmas. It was just after 7 tonight that the first sign things had gone awfully wrong reached flight controllers.
At about 8 minutes past 7 at the Rescue Coordination Centre here at Edinburgh, it was reported by the Civil Air Traffic Control Authorities that there had been an explosion on the ground, and this coincided with a Pan Am Boeing 747 disappearing from the radar screens.
The jet hit a petrol station, it wrecked houses on the south side of Lockerbie, the fuselage reportedly split in 2, and cars on the main Glasgow road were hit by debris. At a hotel in the town, customers heard and saw the crash.
We initially heard a rumbling over the hotel. We thought the roof was falling in. And then we heard a tremendous shudder on the ground as though it was an earthquake. And then we saw sparks and then this enormous ball of flame going about 200 or 300 feet into the air. There was debris flying everywhere.
Some houses on the south side of Lockerbie reportedly all but disappeared. Those whose homes were unhit were mostly making tea at the time of the crash.
Well, it was just about 7 o'clock we heard this almighty bang in the whole skylight. I was looking out in the back kitchen which looks over onto the A74, and it was the sky lit up and I heard this explosion. I realised it was a plane coming down, so we just got down on the floor, and as soon as we passed over and we got out and went round about the other houses, there was a lot of elderly people staring there, so we just more or less to get everybody out and see they were all right.
I was driving up the road in the car, and you know, I heard this horrible sound. It was like a rushing and a screaming noise, and the whole sky just lit up, and then it was like liquid fire started to rain down in the car, and bits of concrete and debris, and we even found a piece of the aluminium bedded in the car.
I was just driving home, you know, and then it must have been about 7:20. I'd be cassette playing in the radio, you know, and I seen this just huge, vast, enormous red glow just lit up everywhere. I was stunned, you know. I was nearly going to break the vehicle, you know, but I took it easy, and then it must have hung in the air for about 2 minutes, and then this huge flash of flames, big mushroom. You know the way you see these documentaries about bombs dropping and that? That's what it looked like.
That's when it hit the ground, you suppose?
That's when it hit the ground, yeah. I mean, it was just vast, you know.
You've been up there. What do you gather from the situation?
Well, I'm 200 yards apart from this place here, which must be about 1.5 miles from where the carnage is. And we were parked there for about an hour and a half. And then I walked up, I took a look around. It's just total carnage, mayhem, you know. It's never seen nothing like it in my life. Never.
There is, I regret to say, very little that we can do, but we have opened up a room here where the relatives and friends of those on board have been gathering. And the best that we can do for them is at least give them a seat and perhaps a cup of tea and get any information that there is going to them as fast as we can. But I would say that the airport in this kind of circumstance does not have a passenger manifest, a list of names. It is only the airline that would have that, and it will be up to them when they are able to issue the names of those who are involved.
Bits of news of the crash being released. One man arrived at the airport having just seen his wife off on holiday. He'd heard reports of the crash on his car radio. He arrived here to be told there had been no survivors. He's now being comforted by staff.
Families and relatives of the American passengers aboard Flight 103 have begun to gather at John F. Kennedy Airport in New York, the jumbo's destination. A Pan Am spokesman talked to reporters at the airport a few minutes ago. He said it's too soon to speculate on the cause of the crash.
We have no indication that there were any problems. There was no contact from the captain or any of the crew members. There were no problems, no indications whatsoever prior to the flight that there were any problems on board that aircraft or with the machine itself. We, if I may now, try to answer any questions that you may have.
There's been some suggestion there was an explosion in midair. Do you have anything on that?
We really don't. We have no indication. As I said, there was no prior indication that there were any problems with the aircraft. There was no contact prior, any Mayday signals. The aircraft had made normal contact with the control center at 19:15. The last reported contact was at 19:17.
Tonight, Channel 4 News can reveal previously secret evidence from the CIA that suggests Libya was not involved in the Lockerbie bombing 25 years ago. The only man convicted of the atrocity, which left 270 people dead, the Libyan Abdul Assad al-Magrahi, died last year. There's growing unease in Scotland about how the case was investigated and handled, and mounting evidence that Libya, which paid compensation to the victims, had completely nothing to do with it. What of other Middle Eastern countries who've all denied any involvement? Julian Rush has this report.
The questions about Lockerbie just refused to go away. Was al-Magrahi, the convicted Lockerbie bomber, innocent after all, the victim of a miscarriage of justice? Was Libya framed, a politically expedient scapegoat to resolve a Middle East hostage crisis? And why, since the fall of Colonel Gaddafi, has no evidence emerged to confirm Libya's guilt? So compelling are the doubts that now even an experienced Middle East diplomat, for long carefully neutral on the issue, is changing his mind.
The more I think about it, the more I find it difficult to believe that Libya was actually guilty. If you're asking me, balance of probabilities, yes, I think they didn't do it.
Two Libyan officials acting as operatives of the Libyan intelligence service.
The US took the world by surprise when they accused the Libyans some 3 years after the bombing. In secret, they were hearing otherwise. The CIA, we can reveal, was being told by one of its own spies, with access to sources high in a key Middle Eastern government, that it wasn't the Libyans. It was the PFLP-GC, he reported, a Syrian-based Palestinian militia led by Ahmed Jibril and linked to Iran. They'd been the original prime suspects. US intelligence reports had said Iran had commissioned the attack from them as revenge for the unprovoked shooting down of an Iranian airliner by the USS Vincennes. Exactly what he knew has remained secret until now. In early 2001, he'd made a sworn deposition before a US judge. We found it, forgotten in defense files of the Lockerbie trial, as it had come too late to be used in court.
I, Richard Fuse, do solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Dr. Richard Fuse was a businessman in the Middle East and Russia with contacts in high places. He was also a CIA agent. Fuse's interview was tightly controlled by US government lawyers. CIA observers sat in. There was to be nothing on his CIA employment, what he called context, only broad brush answers.
Broad brush would simply be that numerous high officials in the Syrian government were quite affirmative of Jibril's involvement in PA103.
Can you give us the names of those officials?
No, then I'm
I'm starting to get into context if I give you those names.
Can you tell us how many there were?
Perhaps 10, 15?
This all matters because Fuse was hearing it from the Syrians as late as 1995, 4 years after the Libyans had been charged. And if anyone knew whether the PFLP-GC was involved or not, it would be the group's sponsors and protectors, the Syrians. Both continued to deny publicly they had anything to do with the Lockerbie bombing. Fuse gave no indication of his Syrian sources' motives, but he was adamant. They were reliable. They had close and regular contact with Ahmed Jibril.
Did any of them tell you who their sources were?
Again, staying out of context, broad brush, my recollection is that they were direct. They were not hearsay sources on their part.
Direct in the sense, as you understood it, that you were being told by the Syrian government that Jibril and or members of the PFL-PGC were taking credit for the bombing.
Yes.
Dr. Fuse confirmed that he'd reported back all that he'd heard to his CIA bosses, which begs the question, why did the focus of the investigation continue to be on Libya?
While many believe the US implicated Libya to get Iran's help in freeing hostages like Terry Waite, held in Lebanon by Iranian-backed groups. Archives from the time suggest America was ready to make a deal for their release.
The evidence from the documentation that we have available from intelligence sources, from Bush's meetings with foreign leaders, for example, does strongly suggest that there was a negotiation process underway between the United States and Iran for the return of the hostages.
Megrahi was eventually convicted. It was controversial then and is more so today. A swathe of new evidence has emerged to cast doubt on the verdict. The most important, by a long way, is forensic. This charred fragment of circuit board was critical to Megrahi's conviction. A prosecution expert testified it was similar in all respects to circuit boards in timers supplied to Libya by a Swiss company where Megrahi shared an office. But these notes reveal the expert had found a crucial manufacturing difference between them. It was confirmed by independent scientists from Megrahi's legal team who were only given the notes 8 years after the conviction.
The conclusion of that would be that they came from different manufacturing routes, different manufacturing sources, and were not the same boards, and could not be described as being similar in any way.
All new evidence, including ours, even if it points away from Libya, is meant to be investigated by Scotland's police. They never closed the case on Lockerbie, and they say in public they're not done yet.
What contact have you had, if any, with the police or any other investigating authority that is meant to be looking at the Lockerbie case?
I've had no contact from any authorities whatsoever.
Bomber was convicted on evidence pieced together from the fragments of Pan Am 103. But 30 years on, the full picture of what happened and who is responsible remains unclear. Abdul Basit al-Megrahi, the only man convicted, was given compassionate early release from Scottish prison and returned to Libya to die beside his family. Now speaking for the first time, exclusively to ITV News, his son Ali Megrahi claims his father was told early release would only be considered if he stopped appealing, something the Scottish government has always denied. Ali says he will now return to Scotland in a fresh appeal.
My father didn't have the chance to go on with his appeal, and I'm gonna finish this chance for him to clear his name. He always talking about he's innocent, and I give him a promise that I'm gonna clear his name.
The Megrahi family have already filed their appeal, and their lawyer in Scotland believes fresh evidence could overturn the verdict.
Libya had the blame pointed at them, and then many years later, in order to resolve the matter, to allow the oil deals, to allow the deals in the desert to take place, that the responsibility was accepted. And sadly, 30 years later, we're still fighting the same battle.
The Scottish Justice Secretary, who controversially released Megrahi, does not agree that Scotland convicted an innocent man. but he does suspect others have been protected because of political deals.
I think McGrath was a player. I've never thought he was a bomber, and there's clear evidence from other people that it was actually another Libyan who was culpable for it. But I don't think he was just some innocent who found himself trapped up in the accusation of the responsibility for the UK's worst air atrocity.
Do you believe in the case of the Lockerbie bombing, politics has been put before justice?
Absolutely.
Helga Mosi was among the 270 killed in Lockerbie. Her parents believe the people responsible have never been convicted.
We want to see some transparency and some accountability from the people, the politicians and others that we pay to govern and protect us. We haven't had it.
Tomorrow, on the 30th anniversary of the bombing, families will return to this town, some still trying to find peace, without knowing if all of those responsible will ever face justice. Peter Smith, News at 10, Lockerbie.